I was 6 miles beneath the surface when the cameras started showing faces that weren't ours. Down there, in the black silence of the Mariana Trench, time doesn't move the way it should, and neither do the things outside. I was assigned to monitor a remote ocean floor research station, told there were 11 rules to follow if I wanted to make it back alive. I remember the first time I broke one. The screens didn't just flicker, they watched me back. I still don't know what was staring through that glass, or how long it had been waiting. All I know is, something down here learns fast. The station's operator handed me the manual, my first day. A thick water-warp binder with red tape around its edges, and a single phrase underlined twice. Rule 1. Never watch the camera feeds for more than 5 minutes at a time. I laughed when I read it, thinking it was some psychological safety measure to prevent eye strain or motion sickness. Down here you learn quickly that laughter dies fast. It gets swallowed by the hum of the oxygen filters and the creaks of metal adjusting to crushing pressure. The deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes, until your own heartbeat sounds like a drum in your ears. Our monitoring room was nothing more than a narrow corridor of flickering screens, each showing a different angle of the trench floor. Some cameras pointed at the research domes, others at the empty abyss, places we had no reason to watch, except that command insisted we did. The feeds were delayed by a few seconds due to signal lag, giving everything a ghostly rhythm, as if the world outside was breathing slower than ours. I kept my eyes on the timer, mounted above the center console. It blinked red after 5 minutes. That was when we were supposed to look away. At first it seemed like nonsense. I'd already spent hours monitoring undersea environments during my training. But when I crossed that 5-minute mark on my second shift, something strange happened. The feed from camera 3, the one facing the trench slope, glitched. The picture distorted into ribbons of light that bent in unnatural ways. I assumed it was static interference, until the distortion began to move like something crawling across the screen. It didn't resemble any marine life I knew, not even the ones classified or cataloged in deep-sea fauna reports. It looked like a ripple of darkness, with eyes that blinked where no body existed. I blinked once, maybe twice, and the shape was gone. The screen returned to normal. I convinced myself it was fatigue, too little sleep, too much caffeine, the isolation. But later that night, when the control lights dimmed and my partner Reyes took the next watch, he said something that made my stomach twist. "Hey, did you see someone outside the dome earlier?" I told him there was no EVA scheduled. "Yeah, I know," he said, leaning closer to the screen, but I swear something waved back. He pointed to camera 3. Its timer had frozen at 6 minutes and 24 seconds. After that, I became careful. Every shift, I would glance only long enough to log changes in sediment or track movement from our drones. I even started timing myself subconsciously. 5 minutes on, 1 minute off. The problem was, curiosity down here is stronger than fear. The longer you stare into that black water, the more it feels like it's staring back. By the end of my first week, I'd memorized every corner of the feeds, every pattern of light reflection, every drifting speck of plankton. So when something appeared that didn't belong, I noticed instantly. It was during a routine systems check, just past 0200. The feed from camera 7, a low-angle view of the East Dome, caught a flicker of movement. It wasn't fast or violent. It was subtle, like the camera lens itself blinked. The reflection on the glass didn't match the lighting inside. It showed a figure standing behind me. I turned, half expecting Reyes playing a joke, but the room was empty. Only the low hum of the pressure regulators filled the space. I looked back at the screen. The figure was gone, replaced by my own delayed reflection, blinking 2 seconds behind real time. The next day I asked our commander, Dr. Ellison, about the rule. She paused longer than I expected before answering. "It's not about fatigue," she said quietly. "It's about attention. The trench has a way of noticing when you notice it." Her tone made my skin crawl. She added that the first research team here, Project Hesper, had gone silent after their camera feeds began showing images that didn't match any real-time sonar readings. Their logs were corrupted, overwritten with static. The last line in their transmissions simply said, "They're learning our timing." From then on, I tried to stay disciplined. 5 minutes, no more. Sometimes I'd glance away early just to be safe. But the problem with fear is that it becomes predictable. Your mind learns to dance around it. Mine did too, until the night I slipped. I had been reviewing the South Trench feed, documenting what looked like a slow current stirring silt clouds across the seabed. The movement was hypnotic, almost soothing, like a heartbeat in the dark. I forgot the timer entirely. When the alarm finally buzzed at the 6-minute mark, I flinched. The camera image had changed. The silt cloud was gone. In its place was something that resembled a human silhouette standing motionless on the ocean floor. No suit, no helmet, just the faint shimmer of skin reflecting bioluminescent plankton. I leaned closer, unable to look away. Its head tilted slightly, as if listening. Then it smiled. The feed went black. I told Reyes what I saw, but he didn't believe me. "You probably saw the drone," he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Still, he double-checked the drone logs. No deployment during that hour. "Then what was it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Later, while I tried to sleep, I heard him mumbling in the monitoring room. When I peeked in, the red timer on the console read 8 minutes. He wasn't blinking. The next morning, Reyes was gone. No signs of struggle, no breach alarms, nothing. The dome door was sealed, yet the interior camera showed moisture footprints leading from his workstation to the exit hatch. The log said it had never opened. Dr. Ellison ordered a lockdown and a full sensor sweep, but we found nothing. She didn't even file an official report. Just closed Reyes's name from the crew, manifest, and reassigned his shifts to me. That night, I checked the feeds again. All cameras were normal, except camera 3. At exactly 2:17, a faint handprint appeared on the inside of the glass. My blood froze. I realized it was pressed from our side, not the outside. I replayed the footage twice before the screen glitched. The handprint vanished. Now I keep the monitors dimmed, only bright enough to catch motion data. I've learned my lesson. 5 minutes is the line between observation and invitation, and whatever lives down there, whatever waits beyond that darkness, it's patient enough to wait for a single moment of weakness. Every time I look at the cameras now, I can almost feel it waiting for me to forget Rule 1. Never watch the camera feeds for more than 5 minutes at a time. The power flickers a lot down here. Pressure, salt, aging circuits. That's what I told myself. The first time the station lights failed completely. We were halfway through a system recalibration when everything went black. The hum of the oxygen pumps dipping into silence. I remembered Rule 2. Never go near the observation windows after the lights go out. At the time I thought it was about safety, avoiding sudden pressure shifts or compromised seals. But then I heard it, not the creak of metal or the low groan of the ocean pressing in, but something faint and rhythmic, like breathing on glass. We're trained to handle emergencies calmly. Backup systems kick in after 15 seconds. We're told never to panic, but 15 seconds feels longer than you think when you can't see your own hands. The emergency LDs stayed dark that night, even when I tried to reboot the circuit manually. Dr. Ellison's voice came over the comms, flat and mechanical, ordering everyone to stay still until power was restored. Her voice had no static, no distortion, but the channel indicator wasn't lit. I realized she wasn't speaking through the intercom. The sound was coming from behind the observation glass. I froze. The breathing grew louder, close enough that I could almost feel its rhythm vibrate through the floor. For a moment, I convinced myself it was an echo, pressure interacting with the outer shell, maybe. But then I heard movement, slow and deliberate, like fingertips dragging along the curve of the window. I backed away until my heel caught on the step near the hatch. When the emergency lights finally flickered back on, I saw condensation streaks on the inside of the glass. They formed 5 distinct lines, fingers traced from the outside inward. We logged the incident, but Ellison redacted half the report. Condensation anomaly, she wrote in the archive, as if that would make it less real. Reyes's name wasn't mentioned, though I found his tag logged into the system 5 minutes before the blackout. No one else spoke of it again, not even when I asked. There's a kind of silence that spreads among crews stationed this deep, an unspoken agreement to pretend reality hasn't shifted. You keep doing your tasks, you don't ask questions, and you never ever test the rules. 2 nights later, I heard the breathing again. This time the lights didn't go out. It was faint, barely audible over the drone hum, but steady. I muted the monitors and leaned closer to the nearest glass panel. The sound was still there, paced and patient, like something waiting for me to acknowledge it. The reflection staring back at me looked pale, drawn thin by fatigue, but it blinked half a second too late. I stepped back instantly. My reflection didn't move. The following day, I asked Dr. Ellison directly what Rule 2, never go near the observation windows after the lights go out, was meant to prevent. She looked tired, older than usual, and said quietly, "You don't want to see what looks back. The trench isn't empty, it just hasn't decided to be noticed yet." I wanted to press her, but she turned and left, muttering something about containment protocols. Later, when I checked the maintenance logs, I saw a note from the previous crew, Project Hesper again. The last entry before they went silent, read windows began fogging, even when sealed. Movement visible in reflections only. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified. The hiss of air vents, the subtle shift of the hull. Around 3 o'clock, a low tone came through the station's central speakers, the kind used for scheduled messages, but there were no messages scheduled. I left my bunk, walking barefoot through the dark corridor toward the main control room. The lights flickered as I passed each section, almost like something was following me, triggering them one by one. When I reached the observation deck, the room was pitch black. For a long moment, I stood still, counting my breaths. Then faintly, the glass began to glow, a dim bioluminescent shimmer outlining the curvature of the window. The trench beyond was hidden in blackness, but I could make out a faint shape moving slowly from the left, not swimming, drifting, like it was being pulled by invisible currents. It stopped directly in front of the glass. I couldn't see its face, but its outline was humanoid, too tall, too thin, the limbs unnaturally long. It didn't move, didn't blink. I took one small step back, the glow flickered, and suddenly the thing was closer. I ran. I don't remember deciding to, but my body moved before my mind caught up. I hit the corridor lights on full power and slammed the hatch shut. The breathing continued for several seconds before fading. When I returned to the control room later that morning, the glass had frost patterns forming from the outside inward again, curling like veins under ice. Dr. Ellison didn't even ask why I triggered the alarms. She just looked at the window and said, "You stayed too close, didn't you?" I nodded. She sighed and wrote something on her clipboard. "It learns proximity now," she whispered, as if speaking too loud might make it worse. "Keep the curtains drawn at night. Don't let it recognize you again." I wanted to believe she was being paranoid, but when I looked at the window later, my faint reflection appeared distorted, stretched longer than I was, smiling faintly, even when I wasn't. Since then, I've noticed patterns. The power fails only when the station descends below certain depths. The air temperature drops by exactly 2 degrees before it happens, and each time, that breathing starts closer than before. The others pretend not to hear it. They avoid the windows, even when the lights are stable, whispering superstitions about the trench having memory. But I've seen what happens when you forget the rule. Last week, a technician named Meyer ignored the warning. The lights went out during a calibration run, and he panicked. Instead of waiting, he ran toward the observation deck to check the seals. By the time power returned, the outer glass was covered in a thick swirling fog. We found no trace of Meyer, only his tool belt lay near the base of the window, still warm to the touch. The cameras caught a brief reflection of him staring back, except he was on both sides of the glass. Now, when the lights flicker, I don't move. I stay perfectly still, no matter what I hear breathing on the other side. Because it's not just the dark that's dangerous down here, it's the act of being seen within it. I've learned that if you're too close to the window when the power dies, you might not come back when it returns. And every night, as I walk past those massive panes of glass, I feel something waiting for me to forget Rule 2. Never go near the observation windows after the lights go out. Communication is lifeblood down here. Without it, the trench swallows you whole. Every crew member learns the radio code protocols before descent, but there's one that isn't listed in any manual. Rule 3, never answer a radio transmission that doesn't identify itself. Twice. The rule sounded strange at first. I thought it was another redundancy to prevent interference or overlapping calls. But during my 3rd week in the trench, I realized it wasn't about interference at all. It was about imitation. The ocean doesn't just echo down here. It remembers. We use low-frequency shortwave comms to contact the surface and neighboring pods. Standard transmissions begin with a double ID ping, a sharp digital tone followed by the sender's name. If you only hear it once, you're supposed to ignore it. That night, the surface storms were bad enough to disrupt most channels, so I was alone in the monitoring bay, while Ellison and the others performed maintenance checks. The static was constant, the kind that seeps into your head until you start hearing patterns in it. I adjusted the dials, trying to catch a clean signal from control. That's when I heard it. One clear ping, followed by a voice that said my name. Just once. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it sounded almost familiar. Calm, steady, a tone that could easily belong to someone who'd been on the same frequency 100 times before. Usman, this is deck control. Can you confirm oxygen flow readings? My throat tightened. The official channels never used first names. That wasn't protocol. Still, it sounded so normal that my hand hovered over the mic switch for a few seconds longer than I'd like to admit. Then the voice repeated itself, but without the initial ping. The second time, it said, "Usman, can you hear me?" The air around me felt heavier, the way it does before something breaks. I remembered Rule 3, never answer a radio transmission that doesn't identify itself. Twice, and I froze. If this was real control, it should have pinged again. I turned down the volume. The static hissed, crackled, then quieted, until I heard breathing through the speaker. Not digital distortion, real, close breathing. My reflection on the dark monitor glass looked pale, as the voice whispered again, but this time, it wasn't calm. It sounded afraid. "Please, Usman, answer me." The feed from camera 5 glitched simultaneously, showing the research corridor outside. I saw a figure moving toward my room, shoulders hunched, head low. I almost reached for the door when I realized something wrong. The figure's motion didn't sync with the sound of footsteps in the corridor. It was like watching a delay in reality itself. I forced myself to stay still, waiting. The radio went silent for 3 long minutes, and then, just when I thought it was over, the double ping sounded, this time, from real control. "Bay 1, this is command," Ellison said, her voice tight. "Do not respond to unverified transmissions. Keep channels sealed until further notice." When she entered later, she looked shaken. I told her what I'd heard, and she paled even more. "That's how they got the first team," she said quietly. "They kept answering the calls, and after a while, they started hearing themselves." I didn't understand what she meant until she played a snippet from Hesper's archived transmissions. The recording began normally, crew chatter, status updates. Then halfway through, a voice came through the static, the same voice as the one giving the report, speaking over itself. Same tone, same cadence, same words, but slightly off, like a delayed echo trying to sync perfectly. After that night, I started noticing subtle distortions during quiet hours. The radio would hum faintly, even when switched off, like a heartbeat just under the metal casing. I once caught my own name whispered through it while passing by. At first I thought someone was playing a cruel prank. Then Ellison banned solo shifts altogether. We were to work in pairs, no exceptions. The rule made sense, until the night of the blackout, when my partner, Dawson, vanished during a sonar calibration run. I was alone when the radio flickered to life again. No ID ping this time, just his voice. "It's me, Dawson. Don't freak out. I need you to open the maintenance hatch." My stomach dropped. We'd lost Dawson hours earlier, after a hull inspection outside the East Dome. The feed cut out mid-transmission, and all rescue attempts failed, but his voice was calm, exactly the way it sounded before the incident. I stared at the receiver, unable to breathe. Then it spoke again, softer this time. "I can see you, Usman. You don't have to be scared." I turned off the power to the radio, but the voice kept going. The sound didn't come from the speaker anymore. It was coming from the air itself, vibrating faintly through the walls. I pressed my palms against my ears, but the words still reached me, muffled and wet, as if carried through water. "You shouldn't ignore me. That's rude." When I opened my eyes again, the lights above me dimmed to a soft blue. The room felt smaller, like the walls had moved inward. Then the double ping echoed from behind me, not from the radio, but from the corridor outside. It was followed by my own voice. "Bay 1, this is Usman. Can you confirm oxygen flow readings?" My body went cold. I didn't move until Ellison's voice burst through the real comm line seconds later, screaming for me to shut down all frequencies. I followed her command, slamming the manual breakers down one by one. When I turned, I caught my reflection in the dark monitor glass again. My lips were moving, but I wasn't speaking. The next morning, Ellison sealed the comms bay. "We'll operate only on emergency lines from now on," she said. "They can mimic the human signal perfectly now. All they need is acknowledgement." She told me never to respond to anything without confirmation pings, and especially never if it used my name first. "Once you answer," she added quietly, "they don't stop calling." That night, I left the radio powered down. Still, somewhere in the static, I could swear I heard faint breathing again. Slow, patient, rhythmic, like something waiting for me to forget. Rule 3. Never answer a radio transmission that doesn't identify itself. Twice. The observation deck is where the deep feels closest. An endless pane of reinforced glass, separating us from miles of darkness. During the day, it's mesmerizing. Shafts of light filtering through distant currents, strange creatures drifting by like silent ghosts. But at night, the water turns opaque, and the glass stops reflecting the room. It reflects you. Every technician on the station learns Rule 4. Never look directly at the observation glass after 0200 hours, and it's the one rule everyone jokes about until they see the first reflection that shouldn't exist. When I first got assigned to night watch, I thought the rule was superstition, something to keep green recruits alert when fatigue made them sloppy. 0200 hours came and went often, while I ran sonar calibrations or checked the environmental readouts. The glass stretched 50 feet wide, thick enough to withstand thousands of tons of pressure. I'd stand there sometimes, coffee in hand, watching the faint bioluminescent trails pulse through the dark. It was peaceful until the night it wasn't. That shift, the others were asleep, and the station's hum was all I could hear, a mechanical heartbeat echoing through metal. The clock on the console flipped to 2:03. I looked up out of habit, toward the glass. Something on the far edge shimmered. At first I thought it was an anglerfish drifting too close to the floodlights. But then it moved closer, slow, deliberate, and the light from the room began reflecting off the glass in ways that didn't make sense. There was a shape forming in the reflection behind me. Rule 4. Never look directly at the observation glass. After 0200 hours, the words flashed in my mind like a warning light, but I didn't move. The reflection had my shape, my stance, but the posture was wrong. My reflection stood slightly closer to the glass than I was, chin tilted downward, eyes fixed not on the sea but on me. I blinked, stepped backward, and it stayed still for a heartbeat too long before copying me again. I turned off the floodlights, plunging the deck into near darkness. Outside, the abyss pressed against the window like an ink-black ocean of nothing. Yet the reflection didn't fade. The faint glow from the control screens lit only part of my face, but the glass still showed both of us, me, and something standing just behind my reflection, taller, head tilted as if listening. I staggered back, hitting the console hard enough to trigger a status alarm. Within seconds, Ellison's voice came through the intercom, asking what happened. I told her something was outside, watching. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "Shut the curtains and step away, now." When she arrived 10 minutes later, she didn't look toward the glass once. She moved like someone who'd practiced this before. "You broke Rule 4, she muttered. After she left, I couldn't stop thinking about the thing behind the reflection. The recording system had captured the moment, the flicker of light, the distortion, but nothing appeared on playback. Just static during the exact 2 minutes I'd been staring at the glass. A few nights later, Havel from the maintenance crew took a dare from some of the others. He stayed in the observation bay after 0200 and stared straight through the glass for a full minute. We found him the next morning, standing in the same spot, eyes open, unmoving. His pupils had dilated completely, black swallowing the iris. He kept whispering something over and over. "It knows my face now." We quarantined the room for 48 hours, and the senior researchers claimed it was oxygen deprivation. But the footage showed something else. For 10 seconds around 2:17, the camera captured a faint impression on the outside of the glass, like a handprint pressed from the deep side. The shape didn't match a human hand. It was longer, wider. Since then, none of us stayed in the bay past 0150, but sometimes, when you walk past, you can still hear faint tapping, 3 slow knocks, followed by silence. Once, during system maintenance, I caught a glimpse through the narrow crack of the sealed curtain. The reflection was there again, but this time it didn't mimic me. It smiled. Now I tape a sheet of blackout film over the monitor at night. It helps me pretend the ocean isn't right there, just beyond a few inches of glass. But every time the lights flicker or the air system groans, I feel it. Something patient, something curious, pressing close to see if I'll forget. Rule 4, never look directly at the observation glass. After 0200 hours, at 6 miles deep, communication is our lifeline. The radio links every section of the trench station, from the sonar array to the maintenance sub-bays. Without it, we're isolated inside a metal coffin, surrounded by darkness older than land itself. When I first heard about Rule 5, if you hear breathing over the comms, do not respond. I assumed it was another one of those psychological health protocols, like the rule about never sleeping near running pumps, because the rhythm might mimic a heartbeat. But that was before I learned what the static really hides when it whispers. It started on the 11th night, after the glass incident. Ellison had me on night shift again, alone in the control module. The water outside was still too still. No seismic tremors, no current flow, not even the faint chirps from the hydrophones. The comms crackled every so often, soft bursts of static that sounded almost like sighs. I kept adjusting the dials, trying to clear the line, until one of the sighs grew steady, rhythmic. Inhale, exhale, slow, human. I froze, headset pressed tight to my ear. The breathing was close, like someone standing inches from the mic. I whispered into the line, "Ellison, is that you?" No reply. The breathing stopped for half a second, then came back louder, wet, uneven. Then a faint click echoed on the channel, followed by what sounded like a throat trying to form a word. I remembered Rule 5. If you hear breathing over the comms, do not respond. And I yanked the headset off so fast, it tore the connector loose. For the rest of the night, I worked in silence, relying only on the blinking lights to track system activity. When morning came, Ellison and 2 engineers ran diagnostics on the comms. Everything was normal. She gave me that same unreadable look she always did when the rules proved true. You responded, didn't you? She asked quietly. I didn't answer. She sighed and said, it'll come back. Don't speak when it does. It came back 2 nights later. I was cataloging sonar readings when the channel opened by itself. A faint wheeze slid through the static, followed by what sounded like water sloshing against metal. Then in a voice that was almost mine, it whispered, you shouldn't have looked at the glass. My stomach turned cold. It knew. Whatever it was, it remembered. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The voice waited, 10 full seconds of silence, then whispered again, this time softer, say something. I shut the channel down entirely, but the sound didn't stop. It bled through the walls now, like the comms were inside the metal instead of the airwaves. I backed away until my shoulder hit the door. Then the breathing moved, faster, heavier, and ended with a sudden gasp. The kind you hear when someone finally surfaces after drowning. Then nothing, dead air. The next morning, we found Vargas from engineering missing. His station headset was still transmitting open signal. When we replayed the log, the same breathing pattern filled the speakers for hours before cutting out at 3:19. No distress call, no shouts, just that slow, steady rhythm until it stopped mid-inhale. His cabin door was locked from the inside, and the only thing they found was his headset lying on the floor, the mic still damp, as if it had been underwater. Ellison started locking the comms at midnight after that. Only she and I had access codes to reopen them. But even with the system sealed, sometimes the green light on the panel flickers on, indicating an incoming transmission. I ignore it, of course. I've learned my lesson. Still, the sound slips through faintly, like breath fogging up glass on the other side of the hull. The strangest part is that it doesn't just mimic people anymore. I heard it last night again, but this time, the breathing didn't sound human. It rasped in short, erratic bursts, like gills forcing water through flesh. It's getting closer. It knows we can hear it. And every time the static hums, I swear I can make out faint words beneath it, something whispering just beyond meaning. Now I keep the comms volume at 0. I let the green light blink until it dies out. Sometimes, though, I wake up to find the headset sitting neatly on my desk, earpiece facing my pillow, as if waiting for me to put it on. The others have noticed it too. Nobody admits it aloud, but every one of us has heard the same thing. Someone breathing our names through the static. And still, part of me wonders what would happen if I answered just once, to ask what it wants. There's a constant hiss in the trench station. Vents, hydraulics, recycled air. You get used to it after a while. What you never get used to is the silence that comes right before something happens. The night rule 6. If a door opens on its own, do not close it became real for me. That silence was so deep I could hear my pulse echoing in my teeth. It started in Corridor C, the stretch between the sleeping quarters and the biology lab, a place that always felt too long for the distance it actually covered, as if the hallway itself stretched when no one was looking. It was around 1:40 when I woke to a hiss that wasn't from the vents. The air pressure had shifted, subtle but noticeable, like the room itself inhaled. Then came the soft clang of the door unlatching. The metal door to my cabin slid halfway open on its own, slow and deliberate, stopping just before the locking track. I lay there in my bunk, staring at the thin line of darkness that split the room. My first instinct was to get up and seal it, but then I remembered Rule 6. If a door opens on its own, do not close it. At the time it seemed absurd. Leaving a door open at this depth meant risking air pressure fluctuations, contamination, or worse. Still, the rules hadn't failed me yet, and after what I'd seen behind the glass, I didn't plan on testing another one. So I stayed perfectly still. Minutes crawled by. The air felt thick, humming faintly, like static charged the space. Then I saw it, a faint shadow moving in the crack between the door and the frame. Not walking, just shifting, as if trying to find a way in. I forced myself to stay quiet. The shadow lingered, stretching along the floor like liquid darkness. Then it retreated, disappearing into the hallway. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, I found Ellison standing outside my room, pale and exhausted. She asked if my door opened last night. I said yes. She nodded, eyes hollow. Mine too, she said softly. But it didn't close after. That day, maintenance reported pressure anomalies along Corridor C. The readings didn't make sense. Doors opening when seals were engaged, systems showing perfect integrity. Vargas was still missing then, and some of us whispered that maybe it was him moving through the halls. But Ellison shut that talk down fast. "It's not him," she said. "If a door opens, don't touch it. That's not how they get in. That's how they learn." That night, I stayed awake again. The station creaked as if shifting under its own weight. At exactly 1:37, I heard another hiss. This time, it wasn't my door. It came from down the corridor, the main access to the lab. I stepped out quietly, flashlight off, watching from the dark. The lab door was half open, light spilling onto the floor. Something stood in the doorway, tall, motionless. For a moment, I thought it was Ellison. But then it leaned sideways, impossibly slow, head tilting at an angle no neck could support. I ducked behind the bulkhead, pressing my back to the wall. The door remained open, humming faintly, as though it strained against invisible pressure. Then all at once, the thing stepped backward, into the lab, and the door started to close on its own. My instincts screamed at me to shut it the rest of the way, to seal whatever that was inside. But the rule burned in my head. Rule 6. If a door opens on its own, do not close it. So I waited. And when the door stopped, half open again, I saw movement just beyond the frame. Not footsteps, not human, more like a shudder of darkness flowing along the floor. Then the power flickered, and everything went black. I heard metal twisting somewhere deep in the station, followed by the faintest sound, like something dragging a hand slowly along the walls. When the emergency lights came back on, the door to the lab was wide open, but nothing stood there anymore. I found faint wet prints, leading toward the maintenance shaft. They weren't human, too wide, too long. I didn't follow them. I sealed my own cabin, and waited for morning. Ellison didn't come to breakfast that day. Her door was open when I went to check, but no one inside. Her coffee mug was still warm. The comms crackled that evening, and through the static came her voice, faint, strained, whispering, "Don't close it." Then silence. Now, every few nights, I wake to another hiss, another door sliding open somewhere nearby. I've stopped keeping track of which one it is. I just listen, count the seconds, and wait until it stops. Because down here, in the black beneath the world, doors don't open for people. They open for something else. And if you're foolish enough to close them, whatever's waiting outside finally knows exactly where you are. The hull of the Mariana Trench station is supposed to be silent. It's designed to absorb the crushing pressure of the deep. Every groan accounted for in the engineering logs. That's why when something knocks, everyone notices. The first time I heard it, the sound came faintly through the walls. 3 solid thuds spaced perfectly apart. I froze, because I remembered Rule 7. When you hear someone knocking from the hull, count to 10 before moving. The rule had always bothered me. It implied there was something out there capable of knocking 6 miles beneath the surface. It happened right after Ellison disappeared. The rest of the crew moved like ghosts, silent, paranoid, whispering in corners. No one mentioned her name, but every eye flicked to the sealed lab door whenever the lights dimmed. I was running a systems diagnostic, when the first knock came. It didn't echo like a metal shift. It resonated, dull and heavy, like flesh striking steel. 1, 2, 3, then silence. I froze, my hands gripping the console edge. I started counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. The air felt charged, every number harder to form than the last. At 10, the knocking stopped. I waited, breath shallow, the station humming around me. I almost convinced myself it was the current shifting debris, but then the comms flickered, a faint voice whispered, "Let me in." My stomach twisted. It was Ellison's voice. Same tone, same rhythm. "It's me. Open the maintenance bay." But I knew better. We'd heard voices before, ever since the breathing incident. No one who spoke through the static came back whole. I shut off the channel and sat there in silence, counting again until my heart slowed. Later that night, Havel came to me pale and shaking. "You heard it too," he said. His eyes darted toward the walls, the knocking. He'd been in Section D, near the lower observation module, and said it was so loud he could feel the vibration through the floor. He hadn't waited though. He panicked and moved immediately, breaking the rule. When I found him later, he was sitting against the bulkhead, whispering under his breath. It followed me inside. We sealed Section D after that. The sound didn't stop, though it moved. Every night, the knocks came from somewhere new, outer corridors, engine compartments, sometimes right beneath the sleeping quarters. Always 3 strikes, always patient. When the crew realized the pattern, we started timing it. The knocks happened every 47 minutes exactly, no matter where they came from. It was as if something was circling the station, waiting for someone to open the wrong door. On the 5th night, I was alone in the control deck again, when the sound started. This time, it came from directly behind me, on the wall separating us from the abyss. 3 slow knocks, then stillness. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I started counting. 1, 2. The air pressure shifted slightly, enough to pop my ears. 3, 4. I could feel vibration under my feet, faint but real. 5, 6. Something scraped along the outer metal, moving toward the viewport. 7, 8. My breath fogged the glass. 9, 10. The knocking stopped. But then from the corner of my eye, I saw movement beyond the glass. A pale shape drifting upward, almost human, its arms stretching far too long for its body. It hovered for a moment, head tilting, as if listening. Then it sank back into the dark. I shut off every external light feed, heart hammering. The next morning, one of the outer hatches was found slightly ajar, its lock mechanism intact, but disengaged, as if someone had opened it from the outside. No alarms had triggered, no breach alerts, just a hatch open to the sea. We closed it manually, though part of me wonders if that was a mistake. Ever since, I've noticed something strange. The knocks haven't stopped, but sometimes, after I count to 10, I hear footsteps inside the corridors, instead of outside the hull. They always stop right behind whatever door I'm near, as if waiting to see if I'll move. Once, when I couldn't sleep, I pressed my ear to the wall and listened. What I heard wasn't knocking, it was breathing. Slow, ragged, deep, like someone on the other side of the metal was trying to synchronize with mine. Now, when the knocking comes, I don't just count to 10, I count to 20, then 30, until the air stills again, because I know what waits if I move too soon. And whatever it is, it's learning the rhythm of our fear. It knocks not to get in, but to see who answers fastest. By the time we reached the 8th rule, none of us laughed at the protocols anymore. Every one of them had taken something from the crew. Ellison, Vargas, Havel, and the rest of us lived like prisoners inside the blinking hum of machines. Rule 8. If you see yourself on the security feed, don't look away until it's gone. Always felt like the cruelest of them all, because when the sea begins to stare back, You learn that sometimes the only way to survive is to keep looking. It started in the central control room, where 24 surveillance feeds flickered across the monitors. We used them to watch the corridors, labs, maintenance shafts, places we couldn't always be. One night, during routine diagnostics, the feeds began to desync. Tiny skips in frame timing, a fraction of a second off. I thought it was interference from the trench currents. Then one of the screens showed me standing in corridor B. Same uniform, same posture, but I hadn't left the control room in hours. At first, I thought it was old footage looping. I checked the timestamp. It matched real time. I leaned closer. The me on the screen tilted its head, just slightly, like it knew I was watching. I froze. The memory of Rule 8. If you see yourself on the security feed, don't look away until it's gone, flashing through my mind like a warning flare. So I didn't move, didn't blink. The figure stared back for what felt like a full minute before it slowly walked toward the camera. As it got closer, I noticed details that didn't belong. Its skin shimmered faintly, almost translucent, like thin tissue stretched over light. The eyes were wrong too dark, too deep, reflecting light that wasn't there. I wanted to turn away, to shut off the monitor, but the rule burned in my thoughts. The moment I even thought about looking away, the figure on the screen stopped moving, as if it sensed hesitation. It leaned in, filling the frame, until its face pressed against the camera lens. The feed began to distort, static warping across the image, but the eyes stayed locked on mine. Then all at once, it stepped back and was gone. The screen went black. My own reflection stared back at me in the monitor's dark surface, and for a moment, I wasn't sure which version of me had just disappeared. I called the others, but by the time they arrived, all feeds were normal again. Ellison's replacement, a quiet man named Dr. Sato, reviewed the footage. There was no trace of what I'd seen, just a static cut lasting exactly 73 seconds. Glitch, he said, but I saw the way his hand trembled when he turned off the screen. That night, I slept in the control room. Around 2:11, the monitors flickered again. This time, the figure appeared not in corridor B, but directly behind me, in the control room feed itself. My breath caught in my throat. It was standing right where I sat, but in the feed, its head was turned slightly to the side, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I forced myself not to move, eyes locked on the screen. My reflection's lips moved, forming silent words I couldn't make out. The longer I stared, the louder the station seemed to hum, the air vibrating like a tuning fork under my ribs. The power cut for 5 seconds. When the lights came back, the screen was empty. I finally looked over my shoulder. Nothing there, just shadows and the slow rhythmic pulse of the oxygen vents. But when I turned back to the monitors, one of the other cameras, this one from the hydrophone chamber, showed a faint silhouette in the corner of the frame. Watching, over the next few days, the phenomenon spread. Sato saw himself in the observation deck feed. Then Kern saw his reflection appear in the engine bay camera, staring at him from an angle the system couldn't physically capture. Every time it happened, we forced ourselves to watch until the image vanished. One technician, Alvarez, panicked during his shift and looked away before his reflection disappeared. They found him hours later in the comms tunnel, unresponsive, face pale and stretched in silent terror, as if he'd been screaming underwater. We sealed the tunnel after that. The feed stayed dark for a while, until one night, I caught something new. In the corner of the monitor, where my duplicate usually appeared, there were two shapes now. One was me, the other was standing just behind, hand resting on my shoulder. The second figure wasn't human. The hand was too long, fingers bent backward like fins. My image didn't react, it just stood there, eyes unfocused, like it couldn't feel what was touching it. I wanted to shut it off, I wanted to run, but I didn't. I stared until both shapes faded back into the static. When the screen finally cleared, my reflection in the monitor glass smiled, my face, but not quite right. I blinked, and the expression was gone. Now I avoid the monitors, unless I have to check them, but sometimes they turn on by themselves, showing feeds no one accessed. The figures are clearer each time, more real. I think whatever lives outside has learned how to mimic us perfectly. Maybe it's trying to replace us one by one, or maybe it already has, and I'm the one on the wrong side of the screen. It's strange, the things that start to feel wrong when you live underwater long enough. Silence, stillness, the color of light, each becomes its own warning. The fluorescent panels in the station hum faintly when powered, but at 6 miles deep, you can hear that hum in your bones. That's why Rule 9, never enter a room, if the lights are already on, always made me uneasy. It implied that sometimes something else turns them on first. It was the 14th night since we'd lost Alvarez. The remaining crew had dwindled to 5. We avoided eye contact, ate in silence, and pretended not to hear the knocks that now came from inside the walls. Around 3 o'clock, the power flickered again, just once, enough to make the lights pulse like a heartbeat. Then everything stabilized. I went to check the secondary control bay, the one that monitored oxygen cycling. The corridor leading there was pitch black, the emergency strips dimly glowing along the floor. But as I reached for the switch, the lights beyond the control bay door came on by themselves. At first, I was relieved. Maybe someone was already inside. I called out for Sato. No reply. Just that humming light and the faint hiss of pressurized air. The rule echoed in my mind. Rule 9, never enter a room if the lights are already on. I stood there, hand on the door panel, arguing with myself. Logic said to check. It could have been a fault in the sensors, but instinct told me that light didn't belong to us. It felt wrong, too white, too steady, like it wasn't coming from the bulbs at all. I leaned close to the glass viewport. The control bay looked empty, but something about the shadows didn't add up. They didn't fall where they should have. The angle was off, as if the light source was somewhere inside the room, moving slowly. I took a step back. The air temperature dropped fast, my breath fogging the glass. Then through that mist, I saw it, a faint silhouette standing perfectly still in the far corner. Not moving, just waiting. I froze. The figure wasn't clear enough to define, but I knew it wasn't one of us. Its outline shimmered faintly, like heat distortion underwater. Then as I watched, it shifted its weight, tilting its head in that familiar wrong way. It had seen me. The humming light grew louder, vibrating through the glass. I turned and walked away fast, trying not to break into a run. The sound followed me halfway down the corridor, a low electric buzz, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Later, when I checked the system logs, they showed no power registered in that section during that time. The lights, according to the data, had never been on. Sato didn't believe me until it happened to him 2 nights later. He was heading to the comms bay when the lights flickered alive ahead of him. He stopped, remembered the rule, and waited. He told me later he could hear something moving inside, soft dragging sounds, like wet fabric sliding along the floor. Then, after almost a minute, the lights went out again on their own. When he finally entered, the room smelled faintly of brine. After that, we stopped walking the corridors alone. The lights began behaving unpredictably, turning on in empty quarters, sometimes staying lit for hours without explanation. Kearns swore he saw someone standing under the lights in the mess hall, facing the wall, motionless. When he blinked, the figure was gone, but the table where it stood was wet. Salt water, fresh, like from outside. The worst night came when all the lights across the station went black at once. Total darkness. We gathered in the central control room, emergency lamps barely holding. I was closest to the corridor door when a soft glow appeared beneath it. The light from the hall had turned on again. but it wasn't fluorescent this time. It flickered, almost organic, pulsing like the glow of deep-sea plankton. I could see shadows moving across it, slow and deliberate. Sato whispered, "Don't open it." We waited, not speaking, watching that light pulse through the gap for what felt like hours. When it finally died, the entire room dropped in temperature. Condensation formed on the walls. Something had been there, just on the other side. In the morning, the system registered a new power surge in corridor dead, identical to human entry motion, but none of us had left the control room. The logs labeled it, operator unknown. Since then, the lights have been turning on at random, like a signal, a reminder. Sometimes, when I pass a sealed door and see the glow bleeding from the cracks, I catch my reflection in the metal, except it's standing under that light, not me. Now I move through darkness whenever I can. Darkness feels safe here. Honest, because the light isn't ours anymore. It belongs to whatever waits behind those doors, pretending to welcome us in. And every time it happens, I wonder if one day the lights won't just turn on, they'll call us by name. Sleep had become a luxury we could no longer afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those two bright corridors, and the shape standing under the light. The hum of the station was constant now, vibrating through the metal walls like a slow heartbeat. We'd stopped using most of the intercoms after they began crackling with static, whispering fragments of words none of us wanted to decode. That's why when the rule list was first handed to me, Rule 10, if you hear your name over the intercom, don't answer, had felt paranoid. But now, I understood it was a warning we'd earned the hard way. It began 3 nights after the corridor lights incident. We were all gathered in the mess hall, silent, eating from the same cold packs we'd been rationing for days. Suddenly the overhead speakers hissed to life. Through the static, a voice said my name. Once. Calm, clear, not distorted like the others. It wasn't one of the crew. The pitch was off, almost like my own voice, but played back through a filter, missing its human tone. I froze, spoon midair. No one else moved. The voice repeated, softer now, "Come to the observation deck." Then the line cut. Sato muttered a curse. He turned to me and said, "Don't even think about it." I nodded, but curiosity gnawed at me. The observation deck was sealed 2 days ago, after the outer glass showed structural stress fractures. No one should have been up there. I told myself I'd just check the hallway cameras, but when I looked, the feed for that section was dead. Black screen, no signal, and yet the motion sensor light showed movement. Slow, human-paced. I told myself it could be system interference. That's what we always said when something impossible happened. But the rationalizations were getting harder to believe. I decided to go with Sato and Kearns to check it physically. As we reached the ladder leading to the deck, the intercom crackled again, this time with Kearns' name. His face went pale. "That's not funny," he said, thinking it was me. But the voice came again, clearer, almost pleading. "Kearns, please, I need you to help me." He froze halfway up the ladder. The voice was perfect this time. Pitch, rhythm, everything. It was my voice. But I hadn't spoken a word. He looked down at me, confusion in his eyes, and said, "You're screwing with me." I held up my hands. "It's not me." The intercom hissed once more, and then, unmistakably, we all heard it. "Open the hatch." None of us moved. The lights above the deck flickered, faint shadows gliding across the frosted glass of the hatch window. Kearns whispered, "Someone's up there," but no one had logged entry. No one had access. We backed away slowly. I felt the metal floor vibrate under my feet, like footsteps pacing above us. Then silence. We decided to shut down the intercom system completely. Sato cut power from the main terminal, rerouted communication through direct cables only. For a while things were quiet again, but that peace lasted less than a day. Around 2 o'clock, the intercom in my private quarters crackled softly. No static this time, just a faint sound, like breathing close to the mic. Then in the lowest whisper, my own voice said, "I'm still outside." I didn't move, didn't breathe. The voice repeated, more urgent, "Let me in." Then a long pause. Finally, "You shouldn't have ignored me." The speaker went dead. I sat frozen for what felt like hours. When I finally gathered the courage to check the hallway, the motion sensors had recorded movement outside my door for exactly 8 minutes. Then nothing. No entry, no exit. Just gone. The next morning, Sato confessed that he'd heard something similar, his wife's voice, clear as day, calling his name over the comm while he was recalibrating the oxygen filters. She'd been dead for 6 years. He said the voice told him to look outside the viewport. He did, and saw her face, suspended in the dark, pale and still. Her hair floated around her like she was underwater, eyes open and unblinking. He screamed until his throat bled. When we replayed the footage, the viewport showed only black, no face, no movement. That was the night Sato started keeping his communicator smashed and taped shut. He said he could still hear her whispering through the vents. Sometimes we all heard faint sounds coming through the pipes, like someone softly mouthing our names, syllable by syllable. It became impossible to know what was real anymore. Last shift cycle, I was monitoring the sonar logs when I heard it again. My name, same tone, same voice, but this time it didn't come from the speakers. It came from behind me. I turned around fast, but no one was there. The console lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw my own face reflected in the black glass. Not the way it looked now, but pale, bloated, waterlogged. It smiled. "I haven't slept since. None of us have." The intercom lines remain dead, power disconnected, wires cut, and yet, every night, one of the speakers somewhere in the station still clicks softly, as if someone's lifting the receiver on the other end. Sometimes I swear I can hear it breathing, waiting for me to speak back, but I won't. Because I know now, it's not trying to talk, it's trying to find which version of me is still human. By the time we reached the final rule, the station had gone eerily quiet. No more lights flickering in the corridors. No more whispers in the vents. No more voices calling our names through dead wires. Just silence. Deep, dense, oppressive. The kind of silence that feels like the ocean itself is holding its breath. When I first read Rule 11, if you see yourself on the camera feeds, don't let it see you back, I thought it meant hallucinations, that the isolation, the pressure, the sleepless nights would eventually make you see things. But it wasn't madness. It was something else, something that had learned to use our faces. It started 2 days after the intercom incident. We were down to 4 people now. Me, Kearns, Sato, and Dr. Alara. The oxygen levels were dropping faster than expected, and the main compressor unit had begun to fail. We had to monitor everything through the camera feeds, because most of the corridors were flooded after the pressure seals gave out. The main screen in the control room displayed 12 feeds, flickering gray and green frames of hallways, labs, and sleeping quarters, each empty and lifeless. Until that night, around 1:30, one of the monitors showed movement in the hydroponics lab. A figure walking slowly past the tanks. Kearns leaned forward, squinting. "Who's down there?" he asked. But none of us were. The lab had been sealed since the breach. I adjusted the focus. The image cleared, and my stomach dropped. The figure was me. Same build, same uniform, even the same small tear on the left sleeve. It was me, walking down that corridor, head slightly tilted like I always did when thinking. For a moment I thought it was a delayed playback, but the timestamp was live. It moved exactly as I did until it stopped, turned, and faced the camera. The room seemed to get colder instantly. My reflection stared straight into the lens, its mouth slightly open, as if whispering something. I felt dizzy, my ears ringing. Then it smiled, but I didn't. It was watching me, through that feed, like it knew where I was sitting. Sato lunged forward and switched the feed off, breathing hard. "That's not you," he said. "That thing isn't you." I couldn't respond. I just sat there, staring at the blank screen, trying not to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't turned away first. The next day, we found the access logs tampered with. The system had recorded multiple entries for me, all at times when I'd been in the control room. One entry was even marked outside proximity, meaning something had triggered the sensors from beyond the outer hull. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't inside. Yet, that evening, it happened again. Different feed. This time, the figure looked like Kearns. It was pacing the flooded corridor outside the auxiliary chamber. But there was something off about how it moved. Too smooth, too controlled, like it was learning how to mimic him. Kearns' hands shook as he watched it pause in front of the camera, tilt its head and lift its hand to the glass. A perfect copy. Then in unison, the real Kearns' reflection on the monitor raised its hand too, though he hadn't moved. He stumbled back, swearing. The copy smiled. After that, we avoided the cameras completely. We sealed off the control room, shutting down every external feed except life support monitoring. But even then, the system began turning them on again by itself. One morning, I woke to the faint hum of active screens and found every monitor displaying the same frozen frame. The four of us, asleep in the control room, viewed from above. None of us remembered setting that angle. And in the corner of the image, just at the edge of the shadows, was a fifth figure. Watching, Alara was the first to go. She said she'd seen her reflection blink in the dark glass of a powered-down monitor, except she hadn't blinked. That night, she locked herself in the medbay. By morning the door was open, and the room was empty. Her ID badge was found inside the vent grill, bent almost in half. Kearns tried to destroy the cameras next, smashing lenses and pulling wires. But each time he broke one, its feed still appeared on the screen, perfectly functional, showing corridors that no longer existed, ones that had collapsed weeks ago. The images were sharper than before, clearer. We could even hear faint breathing through the static. By the time Sato disappeared, I'd stopped looking at the feeds altogether. I knew better. The thing wearing his face had begun walking past the observation windows, just barely visible in the flickering glow of our emergency lights. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of its reflection on the metal walls, slightly distorted, as if seen through water. Last night, the power surged again. The screens flickered on without my command, displaying every camera at once, and there I was, standing in each one. In the mess hall, in the flooded corridor, in the observation deck. Every version of me perfectly still, staring directly into the lens. They didn't move at first. Then slowly, every single one lifted their heads in unison and turned their gaze toward the control room camera, the only one that should have been disabled. That's when I realized they could see me back. The lights around me dimmed, and the air felt heavy, as though something enormous pressed against the hull from the outside. The glass began to fog. One of the monitors cracked, spiderwebbing across the screen. My own face looked out through it, whispering something soundless, words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. It wanted me to open the observation hatch. I turned away, heart pounding, refusing to look again. But even with my eyes closed, I could feel it, like static brushing against my thoughts, copying the rhythm of my breath. Maybe it already knows I'm writing this. Maybe it's already here, waiting for me to glance at the screen again. If I don't make it out of this trench, whoever finds this log, don't look at the monitors, don't listen to the voices, and above all, don't let whatever wears your face know that you've seen it. Because once you do, it's no longer pretending to be you. It is you. If you enjoyed this story, like, share, and subscribe for more.